Imagine you're a lawmaker and you inherit a legal code that's decades, maybe centuries old. Some rules feel outdated, others don't match your values. Do you scrap it, append a footnote, or do you rewrite it from the inside, keeping the structure but changing the soul? And that's exactly what the authors of Deuteronomy did to the laws in Exodus, and the evidence is hiding in plain sight. So let's look at the evidence. Where does this rewriting happen? It starts with the covenant code found in Exodus chapters 20 through 23. This is the oldest law collection in the Bible. It's a mix of civil law, criminal law, and religious law all bundled together. You'll find rules about property damage sitting next to rules about sacrifice. Some laws use case-based reasoning. If a man does X, then Y happens. Scholars call that casuistic law. Others are direct commands. You shall not. That's apodictic law. The covenant code uses both. And for centuries, this was the legal foundation of Israelite society. Then comes Deuteronomy. Chapters 12 through 26 cover many of the same topics, but Deuteronomy calls Mount Sinai by a different name, Horeb. That matches the east source, one of the hypothesized documents behind the Pentateuch linked to northern Israel. Deuteronomy also limits the Horeb revelation to the Ten Commandments alone. The rest of the law, given later, on the plains of Moab. This theological move authorizes Deuteronomy's own revisions. Two controlling principles drive every revision Deuteronomy makes. The first, centralization of worship. Deuteronomy insists on one legitimate place of worship, later understood as Jerusalem. This single change ripples through everything. If you can only sacrifice at one central sanctuary, then laws about local altars, tithes, and pilgrimage festivals all need rewriting, and the Deuteronomy rewrites them. The second principle, a humanitarian spirit. Deuteronomy consistently adds protections for the vulnerable, slaves, resident aliens, the poor. It shifts from minimum prohibitions, do not afflict, to positive commands, you shall love. Scholar Moshe Weinfeld argued that Deuteronomy wasn't meant as a supplement to the covenant code. It was meant as an updated replacement. The authors kept the older code structure and sequence, but changed the content to match these two commitments. Both texts now sit side by side in the final Bible, which creates the appearance of repetition. But what looks like repetition is revision. Centralization reshapes the ritual laws. Humanitarianism reshapes the social laws. Every major change in Deuteronomy traces back to one of these two principles. Those are the principles. Now let's see them in action with two concrete case studies. First, debt slavery. 3 different biblical traditions address this topic, and each one handles it differently. Start with the covenant code, Exodus chapter 21. A Hebrew who falls into debt slavery serves 6 years and goes free in the 7th. That's it. No provision for gifts at release. The slave walks out with nothing. Now Deuteronomy chapter 15. Same 6-year term, same release. But the master must furnish the freed slave generously. From your flock, your threshing floor, your wine press. And Deuteronomy adds an explicit motivation. Remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt. Then the priestly source, the tradition behind Leviticus and Numbers. Leviticus 25 abolishes Israelite debt slavery entirely. An impoverished Israelite must be treated as a hired worker, never as a slave. Slaves may only come from surrounding nations. This isn't random variation. It's a trajectory of increasing humanitarianism, each tradition pushing further than the last. Second case study, the treatment of resident aliens. The Hebrew term is ger, a non-Israelite living permanently within Israelite territory. The covenant code, Exodus 22 and the 23 says, you shall not wrong or oppress a resident alien. That's a negative prohibition. Don't harm them. Deuteronomy goes further. Chapter 10. You shall love the resident alien. That's a positive command, and it doesn't stop at sentiment. Deuteronomy chapters 14 and 26 include the resident alien in the triennial tithes distribution guaranteeing access to food. Watch the progression. Don't harm, then love actively, then provide materially. Each step expands the circle of obligation. These aren't isolated examples, they're part of a much larger pattern. The tithe laws, the seventh year debt release, the slave release, the 3 pilgrimage festivals, all appear in both Exodus and the Deuteronomy. And in every case, Deuteronomy modifies the older version to reflect centralization, humanitarianism, or both. Weinfeld called this systematic. The changes are too consistent and too directional to be coincidental. Once you see it, it changes how you read the entire Pentateuch. 3 legal traditions sit inside the Bible, the Covenant Code, the oldest, mixing civil and religious law. Deuteronomy, a deliberate revision driven by moral and religious reform, rooted in northern Israelite traditions, and the priestly source, focused on sacred concerns, ritual purity, and holiness. Weinfeld noted that Deuteronomy sometimes addresses the same topics as the priestly source, but in a desacralized manner, stripping away ritual framing and replacing it with rational or ethical reasoning. These 3 traditions sometimes agree, sometimes conflict, and sometimes address the same topic from entirely different angles. The Bible preserves all 3. Here's what you can do with this. Next time you encounter a biblical law, ask 3 questions. Which tradition is this from? What principles are driving it? Is there a parallel version elsewhere that handles it differently? And this transforms Bible reading from passive reception into active critical analysis. You're no longer asking, what does the Bible say? You're asking, which voice in the Bible is speaking here and why? The Bible doesn't speak with one voice on law. It speaks with at least 3. And once you learn to hear the differences, you'll never read these texts the same way again.